y'all. This is Erin, and you are listening to Stop Talking About Fat Loss. Today, we are going to chat about a subject that I like to talk about, but it can be a little bit touchy. So, very, very minor trigger warning here. We're going to talk about intuitive eating versus tracking macros, and do you need to track macros forever? I'm here again with my team, Chris and Sarah.
What's up, guys?
Hey, everyone.
If one of you wouldn't mind just kind of going over the difference between just briefly macro tracking and intuitive eating, and then we'll kind of bridge the gap and bring them together.
Sure. I'm going to tackle tracking macros. And so the difference between the two is, like, I think everybody, when we kind of introduce this idea of here's how you monitor your daily eating, it might perpetuate the idea that you're going to have to do it forever. But when we're referencing tracking macros, this is pulling out your phone or keeping some sort of diary, some sort of, diligent tracking measurement of the amount of protein, fiber, carbs, fats, all of those fun things. Alcohol is in there at some point. And we can talk about how to track that as well. But that's what that is going into your day-to-day and being very diligent about tracking your intake. This includes drinks, stuff that has just calories in it, and being there and keeping a diary from your day to day. Now, this is really, really useful for people who are just beginning their journey, or trying to figure out, how to get themselves to a place of, one, better health, or two, to a place of where they're able to manipulate their body composition. But once you kind of know this skill, it's really just a way for you to kind of track where you are, and eventually it kind of peters away from needing to track every single thing every single day to tracking when you want to manipulate something within your body composition. And for the rest of the time, you kind of tackle intuitive, eat a little bit more intuitively. And I'm going to pass the microphone to Chris and let him kind of cover intuitive eating.
The hard one.
I know. I'm drinking my coffee.
Defining, I've already had 3 cups of coffee today, so I'm good to go.
He's going to do it fast.
Intuitive eating, it's a loaded question what it is, because you ask 5 different people, they're going to give you 5 slightly different answers depending on, are they a nutrition coach? Are they helping people in different ways, like life coaches? But for our sake, the way I view it is learning what your body needs through food intake. Right. Listening to your body. Are you hungry? What are you craving? What does your body want to eat more of? Like, oh my God, I'm craving protein, and increasing that. The problem is everyone wants to jump to intuitive eating because you're like, oh, I'll just listen to my body. I don't have to track anything in an app or anything. And to be successful with it, you do need a baseline of knowledge, which is where tracking macros usually helps. You need a baseline of nutrition knowledge, and you need to actually understand your body cues, which most people are really out of sync with what their body's telling them. So you have to be very in sync, because your body's always going to tell you, we want more. That stuff that tastes good, we want more of that. And you're going to need a good knowledge base of what foods contain protein, what are carbs, what are fats, and what are protein and fats, what are carbs and fats, and things like that. So intuitive eating, listening to your body, but there's a whole bunch of things that you need to do first before you can just jump into intuitive eating.
Yeah, totally. I think what confuses people about macros versus intuitive eating is there is the lack of awareness. We go directly to macros for a means to an end. It's that transactional mindset over again. I'm going to track my macros. It's going to lead me directly to fat loss. Whereas in my opinion, macro tracking or food tracking in general doesn't necessarily have to be tracking all of the things, but having an awareness of caloric intake and probably most importantly protein intake, if we're going to be tracking anything, can help us determine why or why not we like have gotten to a certain place. And that's what people don't recognize within the space. I was talking to a potential client a couple days ago, and she didn't want to track macros, and I understand that, but like in the place that she was at, she was somebody kind of similar to myself, where she didn't necessarily have a lot of body fat to lose, but she had some excess body fat, but mostly wanted to put on lean muscle mass. And somebody in that situation really needs to have awareness of food environment. We can't go directly to intuitive eating because we don't have a lot of body fat to lose, and we have to manipulate muscle mass in some capacity. So we know we need more food, we know we need more protein, those kinds of things. And without that knowledge, we're probably going to be stuck. Now, you can get away with not tracking super diligently, maybe if you have more body fat to lose, if you're upwards of, 7,500 pounds, maybe even 50 pounds, you can start to manipulate the food environment and not track. But as you get lower in body fat, you want to put on more lean muscle mass and you want your body to change, you do have to have some awareness. So that's the thing, that it's not necessarily, it can be a fat loss tool, but it's more of an awareness tool. And that's what leads directly to intuitive eating. Intuitive eating drives me a little bit crazy, only because the people that preach it don't aren't really speaking to people who need to learn how to eat. They don't know how to cook. They don't know, like, where, they're like kind of haphazardly getting through their day, running through a drive-through, getting DoorDash. That isn't intuitive eating. Like, intuitive eating isn't just eating whatever the fuck you want and like just hoping that your body falls in line. It's understanding what you need, and then utilizing those needs while incorporating some other fun foods, listening to cues. Like, the thing with macros is you have a goal. If you're not hungry still, to get to that goal, you still might have to eat if you're not hungry. Or if you're in fat loss, you might have to stop eating when you're still hungry. So that, like, when you understand that, then you can move into intuitive eating. And then, yeah, on some days you stop eating when you're full, regardless of like being lower in caloric intake, because what happens the next day or the day after that is you're a little bit hungrier and you eat a little bit more. So then the average balances out over time. That is the main thing that people don't think about and they need to address. And like, when we look at people's food logs who need to, like, they, especially if you want to lose body fat or gain muscle, we're missing huge holes in the nutritional, like, circle or whatever you call it. It's just not balanced. It's usually super high in fat. Even if people are eating quote unquote clean, they're eating avocado toast and nuts to snack on. And I get it, because those things are palatable and usually that's the healthiest thing you can get in a vending machine. We've talked about this before. But if we're too high in fat and too low in protein, we're over consuming calories and not addressing any sort of lean muscle mass or growth or anything like that. So we're just gaining weight. And those are the awareness pieces that people need in order to understand how to eat intuitively.
I think another thing is intuitive eating is not a great way to chase specific goals unless you are really, really knowledgeable
Yeah.
on nutrition. And even then, like, I would say I live in intuitive eating most of the, like, at least half the year. That's kind of
Yeah.
where I live. But it's like taking the scenic route to your goal. Like, okay, it might be pretty and nice to look at, but it's going to take me 2 extra hours versus tracking my macros. Like, if I have a weight loss goal or I have a performance or a muscle building goal, it's the direct route. Yes, it might be less pretty. You might be driving through, like for me, going up to Maine for vacation, it's driving through New Jersey, which is the worst thing ever. Um, but it gets me there 2 hours faster. So it's more direct. You're going to reach your goal faster. And if you're getting frustrated week after week, like, why am I not seeing results on the scale? If your goal is weight loss, like, intuitive eating is probably the worst idea for you, because you're just
Yeah.
going to get frustrated and then react, which is usually like
Absolutely.
cutting stuff out.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah, looking for more shortcuts. And I think that tracking macros in and of itself gets a really, really bad reputation because everybody wants to go the intuitive eating out. They want to be very in tune with their body. They want to be gentle with themselves. They don't want to be super obsessed with numbers. But there is kind of just like a mirror image of macros, which is not obsessing about the numbers, but it's just becoming more knowledgeable. Arguably, when I started working with Erin as my coach, like learning macros actually helped me gain food freedom because I was more knowledgeable about what to grab and what was going to be associated like with my health. But I had to kind of like go through that learning period first. I had to figure out like the numbers of the quote unquote good foods versus bad foods, what it contributed to my macro and micronutrients. And like through learning how to track my day to day, it was like a stepping stone. Like I was thinking, I was trying to come up with like an analogy, and it's like, when you first learn your times tables in school, how they teach you how to put the numbers on top of each other and then like how to actually like do the whole thing, when you could just pull out a calculator nowadays, or your phone now, and just do your times tables or whatever. You do it in your head, but like you had to learn it in that deconstructed way first to understand the actual like mathematical equation for before it comes at the top of your head and you're able to like talk about them. That's what I like want to like really, really start to advertise about macros. It's not about obsessing about the numbers and trying to be as little as possible. It's just knowing what foods get you what results in your body, in your life. Like, I think a lot of us are chasing these like negative symptoms that we're feeling, low energy, inability to manipulate our body composition. And that comes from a lack of certain macronutrients. And until we dive in and figure out what we're lacking, we are not going to be able to change anything on your health journey, not your body, not how you're feeling, or anything like that.
Yeah, you're spot on. I think that is really important for people to understand. When we get a new client, let's say, and they have little knowledge, and most people, this is the thing, most people have little knowledge of what they're actually consuming. I talk to very few people who can tell me I'm eating this many carbs, this many grams of fiber, this much protein. And that is step one. Usually they think step one is us telling them a plan to get started, but it's actually the opposite. It's you telling us where you are at, and that's where food tracking comes in. It's an awareness tool. It's not necessarily, and yes, it can be manipulated for growth, fat loss, maintenance, but the first step is just gaining that awareness. I'll get people in the first couple weeks of their program and they're like, aren't you going to tell me how many carbs to eat? And like, no, you are going to tell me how many carbs to eat, essentially. Like, I'm going to see, you're probably not eating as many carbs as you think. And that's what we see over and over again. And it's like, okay, so we need to modify, like bring carbs up, usually bring fat down, and really get some protein in you. And those are usually the key factors. But I don't know that without having some awareness. And what also doesn't make sense is if like we give you a blanketed goal, and we've done this for free in the past, is give people like kind of macro targets, which I like doing because at least we're not going to some online calculator that's going to spit out an unreasonably low number. But what actually, like, people are like, why are you giving this shit away for free? Like, you could charge for this. And yes, we do charge for it. But I know that jumping off number is really going to give you almost nothing. There's no context there. If somebody can take it and run with it, I'm happy with that. They didn't need a coach. But most of the time, people need some sort of awareness. They're like, if I give you a protein goal off the bat of 175 grams and you're only consuming 80, your brain is going to explode trying to figure out how to get almost 100 grams more protein in your day. So those are the things that like, I don't know where we got this mindset that fat loss was only like, someone tell me what to do, I'm just going to do it, and I'm going to get to where I need to go, because that, like, it just doesn't ever work. And yeah. So like,
I
that's
think that was with meal plans. Like everyone, if you
yeah.
think the early 2000s or 2010s, everyone's doing like meal plans. It's like that only works if you follow it forever and you don't deviate.
Right.
If it continues to work, but usually you need an adjustment. Like I know when I would do bodybuilding, we would do weekly or biweekly adjustments to any meal plan, and people were like, "I've been doing this for 12 weeks. I stopped seeing results like 4 weeks ago." Like you needed to adjust. It's not
Yeah.
like you're not a computer system of like 1 + 1 = 2. I follow meal plan equals weight. Like it doesn't work like that.
Oh,
No,
absolutely
I
not.
did a meal
Well,
plan. I've done
you
that,
did.
and it worked until I wanted to stop eating the freaking meal plan, and then I
Oh.
had to learn how to start like eating again.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I initially lost my like in 2018 2019. How I lost 40 pounds was I ate for an entire year the same squishy shit over and over and over again: egg whites, fish, um, chicken. And it like, yes, it produced results, but it when I stopped, I was really confused, and then I had to like start the whole process over again. And I was based on macros, but my coach just told me what to eat, and so like that didn't really work because I spent that whole year eating one thing, and then I needed to go back to tracking macros, quote unquote. And like I lost my shit because I had been eating egg whites for a whole last year, and I was so pizza was awesome and burgers were awesome, and so like I was rapidly putting fat back on after going through a year of fat loss. So like I didn't understand the maintenance part of it either, and so that's where, yes, it's tedious to learn this sometimes, but once you know it, then you always have a tool to fall back on.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and it's like you kind of need that knowledge if you want to continue to be able to monitor the way that your body looks and feels. It's a tool that you're going to need to keep referencing. Like, like Chris and Erin have touched on, your set of fat loss macros that are given to you on whatever date in whatever year, likely those are not going to be the same ones to yield the same results further along down the line. These
Yeah.
tools are going to like the numbers are going to constantly be flexing and changing with your life, your current health, your current composition. And so this tool, it's like a blank, it's again a formula to plug and play in any certain, given day or time period and goal. That's where you kind of open up the macro book again and go, okay, here's where I am now. Here's where I want to go. Let's figure out what goes in here. And I was having this conversation with a client yesterday because she's kind of coming on to like a little transitional period. She has graduated from a beginner client, like, learning how to track macros, learning how to bring her intake up from years of yo-yo dieting and constantly restricting. And she's like, I think I have this now. And she saw accelerated results while working with us, but she's in a deficit. And she's like, I think I got this. I think I can just go down to only checking in a couple times a week. And I was like, listen, this is actually a time where you're going to need a little bit more guidance because these numbers won't work forever. So I have to teach this client now that we have to come back up to maintenance and figure out, the all of that murkiness in between bringing your intake back up into something what we call quote unquote normal, which right involves a couple pizza nights, involves a couple nights of wine. But as Erin said, that phase of your fitness after coming out of fat loss can get really, really murky because you've been kind of depriving yourself of the fun stuff. And then your macros kind of start to run away. And then all of a sudden the fat starts to come back on and you're like, oh my God, I failed. I ruined all my work. And it's not necessarily that. It's just, we got to go in and we got to figure out the right macro formula for yourself again. What it looks like to live in this phase of your life. It will always be a tool. Old macros, old coaching, old training, it kind of washes away as each day you live your life. Those numbers become more and more obsolete. And what we want to do is like teach you how to coach yourself through those moments. The macros will always change through every single phase.
To Sarah's point, the coming back to maintenance, you can't just go from a deficit and then go intuitive eating for your maintenance. One, you do want a reverse diet period, but what ends up happening is during a dieting phase, your taste buds become more sensitive, your hunger cues get delayed. So if you just go intuitive eating, well, your body intuitively is like, let's eat a lot of food above
Yeah.
maintenance. So
Yeah.
all of a sudden that fat comes back on. So you
Mhm.
still need to track macros till you get comfortable at your maintenance phase, and then you can start to transition to like intuitive eating, which might be like checking your macros 3 or 4 days a week, and then a few days are
Mhm.
kind of like maybe just track a few meals and slowly transition out. But yeah, don't finish the diet and then go right into intuitive eating. You will wreck your results.
Oh yeah, go right back to what you were doing before your diet. Like that doesn't work for anybody. That's why we see this constant roller coaster of weight across the board within this space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it doesn't. I would argue that maintenance is the hardest thing to learn, but the
Mhm.
best place to be, and that's what people are lacking. Like you can the truth of the matter is you could do anything to lose body fat. Most people have tried a million different things. Like it's fat loss is tedious and annoying, but it's not necessarily the hardest part. The hardest part is maintaining your results because the instincts, like Chris said, like our survival mechanisms within our bodies, like within our minds that we don't even know about, are going to drive us to overconsume. And in today's world, we have a lot of fast digesting food that's readily available. So it's not like we're only, we're back in the day when you only had the food you grew or the animals you killed or whatever. It's a little bit different, but now we can drive through any sort of like fast food or Starbucks or any drive through and consume upwards, 1,000 plus calories relatively easily. It doesn't feel like a lot of food. So those are the things that understanding comes into play. And that's why, like, when we're coaching people with fat loss, we try to keep people in a higher caloric range while still losing body fat. And most people's instinct is to go as low as possible to kind of be as fast as possible, but it's going to help balance out that survival mechanism that is going to want you to overindulge, but it's also going to keep you in a place where, like, if you eat as much as possible in fat loss and then you just raise it a couple hundred calories or whatever to go back to maintenance, we're just adding in a few of those extra fun foods or maybe in another night out. Then you just pop that back out if you want to lose a little bit more body fat and you're still eating the same way. And that's where intuitive eating comes into play. It's not whatever the hell I want at Starbucks or Chipotle or Wendy's. It is the same meals you were eating during fat loss with a few smatterings of some more fun stuff in there. And people need to learn what that base is. Get your how much, like, what you need to eat to consume to maintain your results or to lose fat is the same thing as what you're going to need to do to gain muscle and then again maintain, um, with again just some more fun things in there. I will eat the same meals pretty much throughout the year. I eat the same thing. I just during maintenance, I Matt and I might go out to eat twice a week instead of once a week, or I might have a couple glasses of wine on a Wednesday night. Those kinds of things, but my meals are essentially the same. And like I learned how to cook food that I like so that I don't feel like I'm constantly dieting. And that's the other trick, is kind of understanding how to manipulate your food into something that you enjoy that still fits within your goals to create this lifestyle that people want. That's I think that's the missing link, is it's not fat loss and then just absolute mayhem. It's a lifestyle of health year round with some phases of more flexibility and some flexes of more rigidity.
Yes.
To Erin's point, my meals are, other than dinners, extremely boring. Like my breakfast hasn't changed in, I don't know, 10
Yeah.
years. It
Mhm.
is very, very boring most of the time for breakfast and lunch. And then I will have more fun at dinner. I also save most of my calories. Like my largest calorie meal is dinner time. So if you're like, well, I don't necessarily go out or I don't want those glasses of wine, well, just, but you need variety, just move your calories, like more calories at dinner, then you have more flexibility for them or whatever it is. Maybe it's brunch on Sundays. Like move most of your calories there and then just eat lighter the rest of the time. That gives you that flexibility. Dieting phase or maintenance phase doesn't matter. you can have flexibility there. But I think some people get lost in like every meal needs to be like split evenly. Like if it's 1,500 calories, every meal's 500. And yeah, no, don't do
No.
that.
It does
It'll
not, it
drive you
does not
crazy.
need to look like that. Well, and I mean, everybody has a different demand in their life and a different way that they like to eat. Some people like to have a big, hearty, full English breakfast. Some people like to just get by on a smaller bowl of hot cereal with some berries on it. Like, that's what macros is going to teach you. Not that you have to eat 5 ounces of chicken and 100 grams of green beans and 125 grams of rice for every meal to like, maintain your results. It's more like, here's how I like to eat, here's what I need, and here's how I make those things exist together. Like I was talking with someone, they're like, well, what kind, like, how much fat do you recommend that I eat in a day? And I said, well, what do you like? If you like, there are just some people who do not gravitate towards fat heavy items, and so it's very easy for them to keep themselves in kind of just naturally a low fat macro situation. I do not eat like that. I love sauces, I love avocado, I love like a bunch of things that have a lot of fat, so I have to, not have to, but I like to balance my macros in a way that gives me a little bit more fat freedom. And I wouldn't know how to do that, or I wouldn't understand that about myself until I really went down to bare bones and just learned about what I like to eat and what it means for my health and my wellness. And it's like, it's not that I have to go low fat forever and I have to change the way I eat. It's just I have to be knowledgeable about it. I can't just put avocado, like 200 grams of avocado in every single meal. That's not going to work out for me, but I can split one avocado throughout the day and have avocado on all my food, but know how much I'm doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm with you, Sarah. My calories are always at least 30% fat.
It has to, that's what I like.
I do not like super high carb. I don't know if that's from bodybuilding, like the high carb. For me, it's like 400 grams of carbs. Like, I'm not eating that. I'm just not. I will bump
No.
up the fats and eat like 200 or 300 grams of carbs. And even like for me, 300's rough.
It's a
Yeah.
lot. It is a
Mhm.
lot. Most
Yeah,
people
and
are
if I'm
actually
in
eating
a muscle
less.
building phase, that's not that many calories.
Right. Yeah, it's if you ever go through a growth phase, that's where your entire world will change when it comes to food. You're just like, you don't want to eat anymore. Which
It's a
is
second
kind of,
job.
yeah, it's kind of
Anyone
cool.
who's
But
never experienced a growth phase and you've never experienced like, I literally like don't want to look at food for like the next 2 days, and you're like, great, I still have 1,000 calories left to eat.
right, yeah.
The amount of times I sat alone at a table by myself at like 10 o'clock at night with a chicken breast just sitting right in front of me, and my partner's like leaning into the dining room like, you okay? You good? And I'm like, I have to eat this chicken. Growth phase is a whole other beast, y'all.
It's rough.
I,
It's rough.
it's arguably like the hardest one to do because it's not like, I mean, if you were eating M&Ms the whole time and ice cream, maybe not, but like you have to eat so much protein and you're full and carbs, like, and fiber dense carbs, so it's just like your body is like topped out with rice and broccoli, and it's hard to get that many calories of whole foods, even if you are like adding some fun foods in there. Like you're obviously not putting like a crap ton of uh processed foods in the mix if you're intentionally trying to grow muscle. So it's yeah, good times. I don't even know if I ever want to do that again either. Like I really just want to live at maintenance for the rest of my life if I could figure out how to do that without never having to go into any sort of deficit or extreme like eating ever again.
Well, I mean, that's
Because
what
it's
Chris
the
was
pace to
saying
beat.
earlier. Like, it's, if you can get on board with the scenic route, it's honestly really, really enjoyable. If you can, like, think of your health and wellness in terms of, I have I think what most of us do is you go, I've been so desperate to lose all of this weight for so long. I have a vacation in June. I'm going to lose it by June. And I'm like, if you can just give yourself a little bit of a break and go, this year, for the next 12 calendar months, I'm going to focus on getting as healthy as I can and as strong as I can, and kind of let yourself take that winding scenic route. You will be so much happier. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, it doesn't come with the big dopamine hits of the giant scale drops. But again, like the life that you see out the window is it's so much more enjoyable. I've lived in this phase for the last 3 years. Like my initial fat loss phase of 40, 50 pounds was done between June of 2020 and February of 2021. And since then, my body has changed a lot and the way that I eat has changed a lot, but I'm going like the switchback scenic route and I enjoy it. I love it. I think of my like health in terms of big, long, sweeping strokes. What is my body going to feel like in 1 year? In 2 years, in 5 years. And I just let myself go through that journey. And arguably, like I said, if you can kind of just get on board with like going that route, it's really, really, really enjoyable. And that's what you see the people on the internet, those influencers on the internet that pack on a lot of muscle and they show their fancy what I eat in a day and they're very intuitive. They've spent years doing the scenic route, years. And
Yeah.
it's not what they advertise because it's not flashy, but they did that. They're just not advertising it.
It's so annoying though. I wish they would. That's the
I
qualm
know.
I have with the fitness wellness space online is like nobody's talking about how long it took, and we're just giving people these like, yes, I do fully believe that if you hire a coach, you can get there faster than if you don't. But it's still not going to be that like Optavia type situation, like 50 pounds in a month or, 100 pounds in 3 months. And those kinds of things are just not, well, technically we've seen those things occur. It's not sustainable. It's not good for your metabolic health. It's you're very like likely to rebound in those situations. Nobody's learning how to do the maintenance part, which again is arguably the most important part. So you go back to quote unquote intuitive eating and the weight all comes back on. So like and this is probably why I'm not an influencer, is because I constantly am like telling people exactly this. Like, yeah, it took me 5 years to figure this out and to get to a place where like I have lean muscle mass on my frame. I can eat pretty much whatever I want, with some parameters, but like I don't worry about. Sometimes I go into like a slight fat loss phase, but I'm not worried when I go on vacation. I don't like have to crash diet to go on a trip anymore. Those kinds of things. Like, yes, I'm there, and in every single year I learned more about myself. The first year, like I said, I did the meal plan and I had to reverse engineer. So then I took kind of a step backwards to relearn, because I was doing macros before that, but it was all for fat loss always. So it was like I wouldn't really do it because I was omitting things like wine or meals out, because I didn't want to come face to face with how much I was drinking and what my meals out actually were costing me calorically. So yeah, macro tracking was really hard for me and didn't work, quote unquote, but it was actually me because I put in my food, but I didn't put in the 5 glasses of wine I had. So yeah, I was eating 1,500 calories, but I was consuming 2,500 calories. So like those are the things that I had to start to realize about myself too. And that's why I keep coming back to awareness, because we have to identify, like, I can give you the number. I could say eat 1,700 calories with 150 grams of protein and you'll lose body fat. And most likely, if you did that, you would. But if you're going in like I did and omitting your glasses of wine, or constantly going through the Chipotle drive through and not really understanding how many calories are in your bowl, because you can't, each time they do it, it's different. And you're not losing weight, yeah, macro tracking didn't work for you, but it's actually what, like, the lack of awareness that's not working for you.
Yeah.
when
So
when you take that scenic route, it also becomes part of like what you're doing becomes part of you and your identity
yeah,
versus when you're just trying to white knuckle it, you're just like surviving off the dopamine hits and the little bit of motivation. And then you get what I like to call like the post goal blues. All of a
yeah,
sudden, there's no more dopamine. There's no more motivation to push you forward. And you're just like, go back to normal because you're no longer motivated to get to the gym. So the gym starts to slide and your nutrition starts to slide because you don't know what to work for. You lost the X amount of weight by your vacation. Vacation's over now. Now what? And you just like start to slide backwards and have to redo it. Or
Yeah.
you go slow. You're not living off of dopamine hits. It becomes part of your identity. You build those habits. It becomes way more sustainable. But it's really hard to show that before and after immediately because everyone wants, post my 3-month transformation on social media and get all the likes and comments.
Yeah.
The 3-year transformation takes a little bit longer to reach.
It really does.
Well,
You're not going
and
to be
that's
able
the
to
one.
white knuckle it for 3 years.
No,
Oh,
and that's the
God.
one everybody wants. They'll look at the
Mhm.
people's 3-year, 5-year, because on social media, nobody. I mean, you do see some like before and afters of a couple of months, but the after, while it's exciting, is usually not what most people want their body composition to look like in that 3-month time. Like sometimes it is if they were already kind of fit and then they do something extreme. Like there's a bodybuilding coach online that does a 90-day transformation challenge, and so he's working with people that follow him that are essentially aspiring bodybuilders or people already in the gym. And so I like to read the comments he gets because they are wild transformations. But I assume that these people are eating a meal plan. They have a 6-day-a-week training regimen. They already know how to lift weights. They're already eating and tracking macros. They're already eating high protein. So the manipulation given in an extreme capacity by this coach who's like a world-renowned bodybuilding coach, does lead to pretty extreme transformations. But like a regular ass human who just needs to get back into the gym and really needs to like start building lean muscle mass and start losing a little bit of fat doesn't get that in 3 months. They get that in 3 years. It's just like that is that extreme results. If you want to go from like a little bit overweight to somebody that has like defined lean muscle mass, it does take a good chunk of time, and most people are not sharing that information because it doesn't market well. I can't be like, hey, come join us, it's going to take you 17 years to get to your end goal. Like, don't you want to do that? Like, of course you don't. But like
No.
the thing is you can learn it in 6 or 12 months, and then you start to understand the process. Like Chris and Sarah are coining it the scenic route. That's exactly what it is. I liked my results after my fat loss phase, but I like my results a whole hell of a lot better now because I'm eating food. I have more muscle mass. And so like every single year I learn a little bit more about myself, and then I can improve my results on top of that. So we are getting results in 3, 6, 9, 12 months, but you also might not get to this like ultimate goal in just that short amount of time. And that's, I mean, more people need to talk about the reality of that, but they're also not talking about their plastic surgery or any of those things that they're doing either, which like is another topic for another day probably.
Probably.
But just like people need to know that, and you're never going to get there by crash dieting. You're never going to get there by having a meal plan. You're going to get there by learning and by adapting these behaviors over time that will slowly like add up. And then at the end of the year, like most people are unrecognizable. Like Melissa always comes to mind. Melissa works for us. She's a friend. She's been my friend since like 3rd grade. And she started at 317 pounds with type 2 diabetes, PCOS, home caregiver for her dad, mom, like wife, the busiest person ever. She had been obese for a large majority of her life. She tried everything that she could to get the weight off. Started at all we did was give her 4,000 steps a day in the beginning. Now she's training 4 times a week in the gym. She's walking 8 to 10,000 steps a day. Like it's been 2.5, almost 3 years. But in that first year, she was almost unrecognizable and legit just started with 4,000 steps and a protein goal. And now she's she's off 5.5 diabetes medications. She only has 1/2 dose of metformin left that we're hoping to get her off this year sometime. That's it. Her hair's growing back from PCOS. The medical community told her that that was never going to happen, and that's the scenic route. But she was proud of her, like the steps she made the whole, like, throughout. I remember the first time she told me she ran for a full minute. Like, that was a huge step. And that's the thing that people are like missing. They like, she was losing weight at the same time, but that wasn't really her main goal. It was like being capable was her main goal. And once we kind of get out of our heads that we have to go from where we are now to an Instagram model physique, like if that is your end goal, cool. But understand the timeline it takes to get there, and then also appreciate the small, getting from 4,000 steps to 6,000 steps, or getting your protein from 80 grams a day to 120 grams a day, sleeping better. All of those things are indications that it's working, and your body is also going to follow along with you.
Right. Along this pipeline of like starting with tracking macros and kind of getting ourselves up into that intuitive eating range and like going the scenic route, right? It's like really what this all comes down to. And the word that kind of just keeps flashing behind my eyes is just the process. Like, in Melissa's case, and I'm going to talk about, I have a client who started with me and couldn't walk 5 minutes down the street without feeling like she like could not breathe. And like we're talking about extreme cases where people have kind of a far way to go from health to, fat loss. But these specific cases, they were at a point where they had to focus on the process. Like it wasn't about how many pounds can I lose. It became about, I need to be able to walk for 5 minutes. And then you build on top of that. I need to walk for 10 minutes. I need to, and then like these were two people that we started to see, those big drops, those big strides in health, because again, it wasn't so much how many less cupcakes can I eat, and it's more like how strong can I get, how healthy can I get. And that's really, again, like what we want to give you with macros. We want you to understand, why is your energy so low? Well, your carbs are unbalanced. Why is my thyroid not responsive? Well, your fats are unbalanced. Why can't I put muscle on or lose fat? You're not eating enough fiber or protein. And it becomes a daily process of understanding what to give yourself, what to nourish yourself with to get you closer towards health and more in tune with your process. And that's where we learn intuitive eating. We learn from the bottom up through these building blocks. And the more you can really, really get on board with the day-to-day process of it all, you're going to be way less focused on how far away that goalpost is. And you'll find yourself just kind of landing in your ideal body composition, your ideal lifestyle, and it's going to feel great and you're going to be in love with it. And that's what you see for these people on the internet that are like, I'm going to intuitively eat. We're just really in love with the process. We know our process in and out, day in, day out. And that's what we want to give to you as coaches.
Well, we get to a point where you can kind of just eyeball plate and be like, okay, there's 50 grams of protein here. There's going to be about 50 grams of carbs. There's like 8 grams of fiber and 15 grams of fat. And if you track, you're probably going to be off a little bit, but it's going to be probably within 10 to 20% of that. Versus if you don't have the knowledge and you're like, I have a protein on here, I have some sort of carb and what I think is high in fiber, and it might be super low in fiber. For example, you're like, I had a big old salad. Well, lettuce is really low in fiber. Surprise, surprise to everyone. And then your protein might be a steak. Well, if it's a ribeye, percentage-wise, when I looked at ribeyes, technically it's a fat source with protein, with how fatty it is. Yeah. So you're like, oh.
That makes sense.
Oh,
delicious
no.
Though.
So amazing. But when you're like, I increase my protein, and what I find is a lot of people will eat the yummy proteins, chicken thighs, steak,
cheese,
whole eggs, cheese. All of a sudden the fats also skyrocket. You're like, I don't know why I'm gaining weight. So when you get to a point where you understand that, then intuitive eating becomes much, much easier for you to be successful with.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's the main thing, is knowing that. And it's funny because I think this is probably another episode too, but just like understanding fat intake, and that actually being the problem that most people are not understanding. I think we somehow have villainized carbs, and I don't even know how that came into play with the Atkins guy, probably because I did Atkins back in the day, which is now keto, same thing, but I was eating hot dogs as like a main nutrition source for myself, like
Mm.
gross. Literally, that's what I ate. I got out my George Foreman grill because it's healthier. Got the fat out and would cook myself like 2 or 3 hot dogs, of course, with no bun because the bun's terrible for you. But and yeah, I would lose some weight because literally all I was surviving on hot dogs and I wasn't drinking alcohol. I think I was like 21, 22 at the time. So yeah, I was in a caloric deficit by solely eating hot dogs. But like as soon as I brought back like my normal life, like eating or drinking or anything else, everything came back on. And I had little awareness of my fat intake. I was eating, 150 grams of fat a day or something. Like, of course, I was up over my maintenance calories. I didn't think I was eating a lot, but that's what the like ketogenic diet or the Atkins diet did for me. Like it made me think that my rice was bad, but like I could eat hot dogs and lose weight. And so that apparently was good food. Like,
You,
so that awareness is everything.
you guys,
Fats are the epitome of I'm not eating a lot. I don't know why I'm gaining weight because they're
Yes,
so
exactly.
calorie
Yes.
dense.
Oh, yeah. And we have a big problem, you guys, just overall with foods in general, in America at least. Things that are really, really high in fat, really, really high in sugar, and really, really high in salt, because the goal is to make it palatable so that you buy it more. And if I've learned anything over my 31 years of life, is that literally no one knows anything about food, like at
Hmm.
all. No one has any knowledge whatsoever. Like the restaurant industry was kind of like my first kind of dive into that, and like just kind of learning how a restaurant works and how things are cooked. It brought a lot of things to the forefront. Like you guys, again, a restaurant's job is not to keep it macro friendly. A restaurant's job is to make it taste as good as effing possible so that you come there and buy it again as many times as to keep them in business. That is what that is for. I keep going back to Instagram because I've been on Instagram a lot lately. But like, those influencers that like pour a bunch of olive oil all over their salad, and you're like, that is 400 calories of olive oil, ma'am. Please do not tell me that is macro friendly, because that's not like actually what they're eating. That's what they're filming for the aesthetic of their page. And like you guys have to understand that like some certain like boxes, like food that sits in certain boxes, they're made to be that way. And it's not that it's bad, it's just that it's made to taste that decadent. And so we have to understand, the way that that kind of just slots in your like day to day or week to week. You can have a restaurant meal that's higher and all of those things, but you can't like do that for every single meal because your fats are going to skyrocket. But you
Well,
guys, yeah, like we just are really not knowledgeable about. I heard someone the other day, I don't know, pass it back to you, Chris, but they were like, oh, are you going to cut the carbs and eat more fruits? And I was like, fruits are carbs. So what is that?
It's terrifying, actually, how little awareness we hold of our nutritional environment.
most people have no awareness of what they're eating, even though it's something we do every single day. Like you have to do it to still be listening to this podcast.
Yep.
You do it, but most people are totally unaware. And here in America, our issue a lot of times is portion size, because you go over to Europe, France, Italy, and you get served like pasta. It's like a serving of pasta is like 80 grams for a person in Italy, like not the massive bowl you get at Olive Garden, which is like the whole
gosh.
box on the plate.
Yeah.
Like, well, why can they eat that? Or why did my grandma eat this every single day and she never gained weight? It's like, well, she walked to the restaurant every single day and they served this. Meanwhile, you're eating this massive thing and you have an office job where you sit for 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
Topped with cheese, and like that's the thing about like if you like legit Italian food or legit Mexican food or whatever, like it might have cheese on it, but it's like a smattering. Like we have adopted Italian food or Mexican food that's just smothered. And I love cheese. Cheese is delicious, but like we know it's a high fat food. And it's just like I used to work in Mexican food, and the amount of cheese that we put on stuff, like, yeah, it was delicious. Best stuff ever. But it was probably 1,000 calories in just cheese as the topping of the tacos or what, whatever we were serving. And if you go to Mexico, like, that isn't what the tacos are like. They're not. There's not like half of a tortilla covered in melted orange cheese. I mean, the cheese is not orange in general. It's like it's white, and because like the orange is an
Milk is
additive.
white.
Yeah. So the orange is a weird color anyway, but like the cheese is white. It's a little bit on top, if any. It's mostly like the quality of the meat, the fresh salsas, those kinds of things. Or same thing in Italy, like the quality of the pasta and the sauces and everything that they pour themselves into, and then a little bit of like Parmesan or whatever Asiago on top. And so like Chris is right that the portion size is also something to be very well aware of, because that's where people kind of, they're like, well, I only had this one thing to eat. So somebody I know is like, all I eat every day is one Chipotle burrito. Well, if you look up Chipotle burritos, they can be one, like we need to eat more than once a day, but also like it can be anywhere from, I think, like 800 calories to like 2,500 calories. So if you are a 150-pound female, 2,500 calories is over your maintenance calories anyway. And if you're, depending on movement, if you're not moving, and like, I would assume that there's some sort of beverages involved in the day too. So if you have coffee with creamer or a Starbucks drink or whatever, maybe that's 500 calories. So now you're at 3,000 calories for one burrito and one coffee drink if you don't have anything else. So then we're up over, way over our maintenance calories. So this is how fat loss occurs relatively easily, where you feel like you're not eating enough or you're not eating a lot, but you're consuming a significant amount. And usually, we're going back to it, it's fats.
Oh yeah. Well, and
So
places like Chipotle have like a huge like margin of error too. You guys are only operating with like a little scoop that like says somewhere on the label that's probably burned off at this point that it's like 5 ounces. And one person will go in and barely fill the scoop, and someone will go in there and like give you a towering scoop. You go to Chipotle or like we've been to restaurants, they're not pulling out the scale like we do at home and measure out the grams of our protein. So like while even if you are someone who's paying attention to the caloric content like on a website or something, or like at a kind of build your own Mexican place like Chipotle, those macros might not even be accurate based on who is working there that day, how much sauce you decided to put on your stuff. Like they're eyeballing all of it, so it's really not accurate at all.
yeah,
No, it's huge.
and when you're dealing with lean, like carbs and lean proteins, margin for error is not that big. But when you're dealing with fats, like an ounce of olive oil is 120 calories. So you accidentally get an ounce and a half. That's 80 extra calories. And then you accidentally get a little extra cheese. That's another 50 calories. And you accidentally get a little guac. All of a sudden, like all these things start to add up. And next thing you know, your meal is accidentally 300-400 calories more than you thought. Do
Yeah.
that twice a day. Oh, yeah, you're not going to lose weight.
And that's why you see fitness like people out there in the wild where I'm like, okay, so for instance, I will tell somebody tacos are always on the table for me. It doesn't matter what phase I'm in, I will always eat tacos. But if I'm in more of an intuitive eating phase, I'm not going to pay attention to how much cheese I sprinkle on each taco or whether or not I put a dollop of sour cream. If I'm in somewhere where I want to manipulate my body composition or be in a fat loss phase, I just skip the sour cream and the avocado, because again, those are the two like fat sources that I know I cannot effectively eyeball or track. Like if I'm just out in the world building a taco, I'm not going to be able to eyeball that well. And so I'm just going to stick with something like salsa, where if I put an extra tablespoon of salsa on one taco, it's 10-15 calories not an
Yeah.
additional 120. And so that's why that's the flex that we're kind of talking about. It's not that I can never have cheese again or never can have sour cream on my tacos again. It's that depending on what phase I'm in, I'm going to skip it because it's not as easy for me to track or monitor.
My hack for tacos during dieting phase: corn tortillas, because they're much lower in
Fiber.
calories, and fiber. They're higher in fiber. And I pick one fat source, because a lot of people do sour cream, guac, and cheese, and maybe
Yeah.
even like they're using pork or ground beef. Like, lean protein source, pick one fat source.
Yeah.
That's fat loss phase, and then in maintenance phase, I'm gonna have fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
No, I like it. I think that's a good place to wrap it up. Kind of give, like, we've come full circle, kind of understand what that looks like for understanding why you need to account for your food in some capacity. Maybe it's not tracking full macros, but just having an idea of your food, understanding how much protein you need, understanding how much fiber you need, learning that, and then going to this intuitive eating phase or partial intuitive eating phase where you can have a little bit more fun. That those are the things that people need to know and analyze where they need to be. And once you do that, the intuitive eating part just kind of comes naturally too. Like, I don't know about you guys, but just kind of some last thoughts here. But, when I'm in a maintenance or intuitive eating phase, I can like go on vacation without tracking at all and not worry about it. But then I just get back, and maybe the first 2 or 3 days I track just to establish a baseline of where I need to get back to. But then I can go back to intuitive eating if I want to, or, whatever the case may be. It's not like I don't freak out anymore when I come back from a trip, whether or not the scale is up or down or whatever the case may be. It's just kind of status quo. I can prioritize some protein items on vacation, but most of the time just enjoy it and then come back, get back to my baseline and live my life, or, go back to fat loss or whatever, whatever the case may be.
Absolutely. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I sit in the same camp. Well, and it helps me also like just be more knowledgeable within those time frames too. Like I know what makes me feel good because what I would used to do is like, oh, I'm out, like I'm away from home. I now like have no ties to any healthy version of myself whatsoever. Cookies for breakfast, amazing. Latte, give it to me. Donut later, great. Pizza for dinner, fantastic. Like, and now I know that if I were to do that, like that sounds like really fun and cool vacation time on paper. I would feel like crap if I ate like that. And that's more
Yes.
important to me. That's more important to me. Yes, even on vacation. Like I have now these markers where I prioritize, where I'm like, okay, my breakfast still needs to be pretty protein heavy. I want to make sure that I
Yeah.
have fruits and veggies throughout my day. And like now I'm not like, when you spend like 20, 30 minutes in the bathroom on vacation and you're like, wow, I wish I wasn't in here. Macros are going to help you figure that out. I can effectively vacation now.
We used to go so hard. My wife would be like, I just want like shrimp and salads for the next like week after vacation.
Yeah.
And now I was like,
That was me.
yeah.
I need something green. Like I wouldn't touch a damn green thing the entire time I was on a trip. So yeah. Well, I hope that this was helpful for you guys. And if it was, if you wouldn't mind subscribing, writing a review, sharing these episodes, it really helps us to get the word out there to share with more people. So thank you all for listening, and we will be back next week.
Thanks, guys.
See you guys.